Good morning, Kennedy. We welcome you to this morning's live stream with Mr. Ricky Irving Jr. Mr. Irving is an Emmy Award-winning producer on CBS Mornings, covering a wide range of stories from criminal justice, civil rights, sports, entertainment, and human interest features. Ricky's also worked as a field producer at the Weather Channel. He's also had stints at a couple of local stations in Texas where he's from. Ricky is an alum of the University of Texas at Arlington. He joins us today to talk about representation in the media. In the interview you're about to watch, conducted by Sophie Clancy, Mr. Irving will speak to us about the way he has ensured fair representation in the media and some of the work he has done to promote diversity and inclusion in journalism.
Thank you, Preston. It is now my pleasure to welcome to our Day of Belonging, Mr. Ricky Irving Jr. Hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Great. I'm doing great. So if you could give us a little bit of background about how you got into what you do, tell us what you do exactly. Just give us a little bit about you.
So I'm a producer on CBS Mornings. I've been there almost 3 years. I would say, it's a job I wanted to do. Since I was 12 years old, I wanted to work on a network morning show, and so that's what I'm doing now. So I would say I'm living my childhood dream. And I produce stories, a wide range of stories. From today was an obit. I did an obit on Bobby Knight, the college basketball coach. So, and then I'll do a story on Tiny Desk, which is a really fun story to do. So it ranges on the stories I do. I've also worked at the Weather Channel and field produce. Field producing is one of my favorite jobs to do. I love being in the field. I love talking to people when out doing a story. So.
Oh, sounds good. Can you share a pivotal moment in your career where you felt that the representation in the media truly made a difference for the Black community?
So I think the main thing that probably comes to mind is 2020. While it was COVID happening, there was a racial reckoning happening after the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. So that at that point, I think you were seeing more and needed more Black voices on TV to talk about that. And also, and I think you needed more Black voices to talk about how to not should this be taught? No, but it was lessons learned on how to be anti-Black. It wasn't just how not to be racist, but how you shouldn't be anti-Black. And just seeing those being out there in the videos, and that was something that was needed in 2020.
Would you say that you were always motivated to make a difference like this, or was it just like this? What was going on in the world fueled you even more?
I want to say it was more for me to. I wanted to tell stories, and I wanted stories that look like me to be told. That's what I would say. Yeah,
it's really important, especially coming just from all different backgrounds. I think in the last couple of years, there's been an exponential increase in the amount of stories we hear. And I think it's really amazing when we can hear a variety of perspectives. So, sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, and I would say, like, even my story, I'm Black, but like someone else I'm from Texas. And so someone who is Caribbean Black has a different experience, and that's in New York. So that's definitely, I think, are needed in a newsroom.
What are some initiatives or projects that you've been a part of to promote diversity and inclusion in journalism?
So I'm a part of NABJ, National Association of Black Journalists. And so I think they do a really good job at just holding media companies accountable, and making sure that the journalists are represented, and the stories that we tell, that those stories are being told on the networks or in newspaper too, like on digital and all of that too. I work in a TV medium, so I always think about TV, but that's what I always think. NABJ is something I always I will always go to. At CBS News, we have a race and culture unit that focuses on reviewing stories that has a racial or cultural background, making sure those are told fairly and accurately. And also, we have a show that's produced by it's in partnership with BET and CBS News, and it's called American Black. So working on that show is definitely something I enjoy because all the stories we tell, and this all the producers are journalists. Most are from CBS News and BET. We're all in the Paramount Global. Those stories are about Black people. They're all focused on Black stories, and so that's something that I really enjoy working on. I worked on two stories. It's a news magazine show, so I worked on two stories. One was about rap lyrics on trial, which is you probably wouldn't see like in other mainstream news, even though we did on CBS Mornings, we covered it because I produced it also on there. But we did another story on Afrobeats, and that was new to me because I
Yeah.
didn't know much. I listened to Afrobeats, but I didn't look into it, so I had to do my own research for it. For it, our correspondent, he's Ghanaian, so he grew up listening to Afrobeat. So that was having that diversity within our Black diaspora is good because he knows about Afrobeats and more than I would do. So just working on that show.
Yeah, that's really important because I think it just people group races and religions and sexualities just as one large group, like one
Yeah,
black community. There's so many more stories and pieces that make up the puzzle. So I
yeah,
think it's really
definitely.
important that you can, in your job, you can really use that power you have to show all the different avenues of culture.
Yeah, definitely.
What challenges have you faced as a Black producer in the media industry, and how have you overcome them to achieve your successes today?
I think just letting your voice being heard, and not being labeled um, the Black producer,
Right.
producing just Black stories. So that's always a balance. You have to like play. And even currently, like, but a media executive, she's like, she once said, if no one's going to tell our stories and pitch our stories, who's going to do it? So we shouldn't be ashamed that only pitching stories that have a Black voice, which is something that I do. I would say 75% of the time, I make sure if a story that I'm pitching, because we're assigned stories also, so that's like stories that I pitch, I make sure that it has I try to at least has a Black voice, Black character in that story.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I like how you can kind of add what you want because you have the creative freedom at that level. Do you think that
Yeah.
people who are lower maybe in the CBS world, like are they able to have their voice heard through media narratives, or is it more of a higher level thing?
No, I think anyone. I think I think anyone could. Like you just, I think you have to, as you have that confidence, you
Right.
build that confidence up. So, um, I think a way to build your confidence up and be heard is by pitching. Pitching has, I think, changed how I learned it early on, but pitching like changes how people see you, and it boosts your confidence. I pitch stories all the time. My boss just told me on Monday. He was like, "You're pitching all the time," and that's something I always do. I see stories, and I'm like, "Oh, this would be a good story that we can tell. Let me think about how we should tell that story." One thing, it was just this past week, and it was a viral type of story, but TikTok critic Keith Lee went viral in Atlanta and going to restaurants, and it was something that I was like, oh, we should do something on that story. And so we end up doing it in our talk at the table. And it was just something I put in our pitches. So I just think pitching helps. And even if you're younger in your career, that kind of boosts your confidence, I think, and to be heard.
Definitely. Yeah. How do you ensure that the stories and narratives you produce are authentic and avoid perpetuating stereotypes?
I look at pictures. So I'm I'm producer, so I'm the one who is selecting the images. So with the help with also collaborating with my editor. So I'm the one who's selecting images. So I'm the one who's gonna like the viewer is gonna see what I pick. So I just try to make sure the image that I pick is a good image representing that person, that community. Um, Sometimes you can't help it, but it's just one of those things. I try to be mindful of that. Um, when I was in local news, I tried to make sure like we didn't have too many mugshots of black people in a show. If that show like it was crime after crime after crime, I was like, well, let me like figure out how to
Yeah.
show this person in another way, even though they committed the crime, like allegedly they committed the crime, but I just try to figure out a way how to show them differently, because mugshot after mugshot can be, I think, harmful.
Yeah.
I think.
Definitely. And I think in an era where everything's online and social media and we can just look at a picture instantly, I think it's really important to contrive those narratives perfectly. Even if they did do something bad, it's important to think about how they're going to be received and how the community is going to be received.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think as a producer and with your editor, I think that's a really powerful tool that you are able to use.
Yeah, definitely.
So in
Sorry
your
for the
opinion,
construction. I'm like in the middle of New York City.
oh, no problem. In your opinion, how can young aspiring journalists and media professionals promote and prioritize representation in their work?
um, I think if you're finding the voices, that's one thing. Characters. So stories have characters, and for me, I always, like I said, 75% of the time, I try to look for people who look like me as the characters and the voices. So I think that's how you can do it, especially expert voices, like the doctors and the lawyers and like someone who can like add context. I think having those people who, for me, like who are black, is great. Like we see, like, oh, this person's a doctor. We're not only seeing one race as a lawyer or a doctor. We're seeing other people. So that's one thing that I always think about when I'm doing a story, and I think as a young person can think about is how can I make sure I have diverse characters in a story. And this is back in my mind. I remember doing a story on COVID, and I was looking at my story when I was done, and I realized that everyone that I had was white. So I was like, oh, I need to add some more diversity to characters and people who are just out, like who we interview in sound bites. So that was something that I went back and I changed out some of those sound bites to make sure that there was some diversity in that story. And I'm not sure everyone does that, but it's just something that I looked at. I was like, oh, okay, I need to add some more color
Yeah,
to.
and I think it's important, especially when you're growing up, it's important to see different types of people and different stories. And I think that if you can add, I think that's really important.
Yeah,
So growing up in Texas, you mentioned, right?
yeah.
Do you feel that as you've gotten older, there's been more representation than compared to when you were younger?
On TV, yes, I do. I do think so. There's more TV. There's definitely more representation on on TV. I think in journalism as a whole, there's less black men in TV, so that's just something um, you're, I think you're just not going to see.
Right.
And if you do, they may be like an athlete or celebrity type. So
Right.
I think there is it's slowly getting there. I feel like it was more from when I was younger, and then now there's more people, but definitely behind the scenes it could be more. And that's just I think that's just all industries, but definitely TV. There's not a lot of black men, and so like not at all.
Yeah.
And so you're one like you're there's that when I was younger, you always hear people like, "Oh, you're the only one in the room." Like literally, sometimes I'm the only one in the room, like and meetings. So and only like black male in the room. So it's definitely something I think about when I'm at work.
Yeah. Okay, so in an era where misinformation is rampant, what steps do you take to ensure that the content produced under your guidance is both accurate and useful for viewers?
I think just make fact checking myself. That's one thing, but also too, I think CBS News we have a just our standards is like I think journalistic standards is to make sure everything's factual, but we have to send scripts to every scripts to standards legal, and if it's dealing with race and culture. So if someone there's lots of people who are looking at this script to making sure that it is factual, it is good for our story to air.
Okay, can you talk about an instance where you felt your work had a direct impact on a community, not necessarily the Black community, but just any community in general?
I think a community. I think when it comes to, I think I just think about the George Floyd. Um, I I was part of that trial. I covered it for our network, and afterwards we talked to a juror, and I produced the interview, and it was I walked away from it thinking like this was must be traumatic for this person because they had to be part of the trial, but also too with me like we're hearing about a man getting killed every day, like details, graphic, and then also me like a black man getting killed. So that was something that you have to like take a step back and be like, okay, how can this make this digestible for the viewers? Um, and that's what like having someone the voices to like dissect that for our story. One juror that we talked to, I remember he said that he during the interview, Gail asked a question about how was it for you going every day. He said, um, it was difficult because he exactly said that I was going watching a black man who looks like me get murdered every day. And I was like, oh, that I think we have to relate, like say that on TV to like make people point like this was wrong.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really difficult thing to talk about, and I appreciate you opening up and sharing with us how you were able to navigate that in such an important role in that type of situation, delegating the story to
Yeah.
citizens everywhere. In a collaborative field, how do you navigate and resolve conflicts with a team?
Talking. It sounds cheesy, but I think just talking it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, just talking it out, like going through. Yesterday was a prime example. We had a story about this woman, her son. It's I guess news and everything is sometimes can be doom and gloom. But this woman, her son got killed by police in March. They didn't tell her until August, so nearly 6 months. Um, and they actually buried him behind the prison without her knowing. And they said they contacted her. So we had to make sure, like, we hear her side of the story, but we didn't hear it from the police. So we had to figure out how do we make sure we have both sides. And we're going by the death certificate. There was like discrepancy of like, well, should we say that police says he got killed on the highway, but the death certificate says that he got killed in the interstate exit. So it's those minor details of making sure, because someone getting hit on the highway, like walking across a highway, is just kind of, it's not normal. Like someone walking on the highway isn't really normal, but someone walking across the street of an exit, that could be like there's a stop sign, maybe a walk, like a sidewalk there. So there was like back and forth between myself and like a couple other producers and my boss, like trying to figure out what should we do. And so we went with what the death certificate exactly says, and we sourced the death certificate. So it's not that we said this is what the death certificate said, which comes from the county. So we're sourcing them, so it won't come back on us saying like, oh, we said he got killed on the highway. So it was just yesterday we were collaborating trying to figure out like what should we say on this graphic, because it was also a graphic, which means people will read those on the words.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's difficult. I can imagine every day hearing those kinds of stories just brings you down. So how do you kind of stay above all of it and just center yourself within your own life, you know, because you're constantly around pressing news.
I'm a newsie, so I watch the news all the time. I watch the news all the time, but when I'm at home, I don't. I try not to watch news as much. I watch the evening news because it's the evening news, and I have to figure out like what's we're covering before I go to work. It's the same story, but like during the day, I'm not sitting around watching CNN. I don't do that. I remember I used to do that, and I'm like, this isn't really good. So I just, everything's on the phones. So I get notifications like, oh, I'll read that. Like if it's something that's like important, I feel like, or I should know more about, I'll read it. But I don't sit around like watching CNN all day. I actually don't watch TV a whole lot in general. So that's which I shouldn't say because I work in TV, but I watch the show that I work on, other shows, but a couple other shows, but I don't watch TV that much.
Okay. How do you see the role of producers evolving in the context of promoting diversity and social justice in the entertainment industry?
Evolving? I think it's changing every day, all the time. Just getting people more diverse on news teams. That's kind of really how I feel like knowing about different parts of the country, and I think when people think diverse, they think race, and this definitely goes way beyond that. You got race, you have sexuality, you have religion. So I think we have to go beyond just race. So I think just having really a news team that is diverse on different, and how they get their news too, because I'm a millennial, and I'm not on TikTok, but there's a lot of stuff on TikTok, and we have on our staff people who are Gen Z, and they're on TikTok. And I remember one time a meeting, and someone says like, "Oh, I saw on TikTok," and I was like, "Oh." It's so funny to see like the different generations in the newsroom. Like someone mentioned TikTok, and so I downloaded TikTok and joined just because I'm like, well, I had to. The one time I had to get a video for a story, so I'm like, well, let me download TikTok, sign up, and so
Yeah.
I only use it for. I really only use it for work. So, but I think just having that,
You're probably
evolving.
the only person in the world that can say that they use TikTok for work.
No, well, actually, I think a lot. Well, showing probably my age, but I think a lot of people like around my friend group or friends or people my age, like probably don't use it on a daily basis, but more for work. But yeah, I do get that because my niece is a senior in high school and she
Okay.
uses it all the time. But yeah, I think that's how like just having more a news team that's diverse in all aspects. That's how I can see it, like involving more. And how we get how we get our news, that's going to change. Like it changes all the time. We're a 24/7 news cycle. Like it's only going to get worse. um,
Yeah.
so I think we're gonna things are always going to be like at the like our fingertips.
Yeah. Just thinking about TikTok, do you think that shorter, catchier, I would say, videos and pictures is the way of the future for news?
So I say yes and no because um, TikTok, those videos, they do make it like what the oh wait the if you go to our like CBS Mornings TikTok, those videos are snippets of like our news, our
Right.
stories, or interviews. So yes, that does. On TV, I don't think we could do that very much. Just
Right.
it's just different. It's a different medium, and I don't know how can marry the two. Someone said that we have to be able to produce for TV and for smaller screens, our phones. So we can't just always think linear. Like that's definitely gone those days of just thinking about TV. We have to think about digital and our phone, how to produce for that. So I'm always thinking about, oh, if I produce a story and it can't go on like sometimes we have restrictions on like video and that we can use on the internet. And I always think about, oh, how can I make this story web safe? By adding like pictures instead of video or something like that.
So when you're writing your narratives and writing the script and thinking about what they're going to actually say, what criteria do you consider for the types of words you use to elicit certain messages?
I'm not sure I understand your question actually.
Yeah. So what I'm kind of thinking is when you're deciding what to say, what
Yeah.
exactly, like what words and like what kind of, like even the kind, because I can think of just like saying someone understands something versus someone is like comprehending. It's just, like it elicits a different message. You know what I'm saying? So how do you kind of maneuver around words and like what they mean and being careful with your word selection?
I try to, for me, I think a lot of people, I think trying to be conversational. That's really the main thing is making sure you're conversational. Um, and if I can tell this story to a friend, that's how I think it should be written. Of course, grammatically correctly and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but making sure that it's digestible in a way that if I'm just telling a friend, um, is written that way. So conversational is one way. Um, I think, and then also one way is writing around sound bites, letting the person you talk to tell the story. And you kind of have your tracks just kind of push the story forward, like add information that they didn't say or left out. That's something that you could do. And actually probably is the best thing to do is just let that person like, it can't be, of course, it can be all sound bites, but like having it flow from sound bites and have that conversation, I think that's really, really good way to do it. And that's actually probably the best stories when someone is telling it in their in their way, and you just adding your sound bites, your tracks to it.
Sorry, I worded that bad. But yes, that's kind of where I was going with that answer. So, can you discuss the importance of diversity behind the scenes?
I think diversity behind the scenes is more important than diversity on camera. The people who are behind the scenes are the ones who are making decisions. So from the producers and the executives, I think those people they're the ones who are hiring people on TV. So I think that's I chose to be I wanted to be a producer because I have one reason, probably because I'm bossy. Most producers are bossy, but I think because I wanted to have an impact in that way. And that's so important when it comes to like stories, and because again, someone on TV, while they are on TV and people see them, the people behind the scenes are, I can say this, I'm producer, we're probably doing a lot of the work. So it's like, oh, I want to make sure that the story is accurately told, fair, and if it's having something to do with someone that looks like me, that it's done, I guess, fairly, and I'm going to be part of it too.
Do you have any specific stories of that kind of manifesting how diversity behind the scenes created a better story?
Yeah, I did a story recently. I think a lot of examples, but I did a story over the summer. It was about Tiny Desk, NPR's Tiny Desk, and so anyone could have done that story. It could have been. It wasn't anything about race or anything. It's just about Tiny Desk. But there was a rapper in the story called Juvenile. And so I was like, oh, I think we should I think we should interview him. Part of it. They gave us a list of people that we can go to. It was Juvenile, um it was someone from Euphoria, which I forgot his name, and some other people. And they were some I've heard of them, some I haven't. One was Babyface and some other people. But I just figured like Juvenile is huge, and he's huge in a way of like a generation, like a couple generations would know who he is, and it'll be like viral. And so I picked that concert to go to. I didn't tell my bosses that I picked that until a couple of days before, because I knew if I did, they're gonna be like, "Oh, I'm not sure that kind of fits like our demo, whatever that means, whatever like our demo." So I waited a couple of days. I was like, "Oh, we're gonna be talking to Juvenile," and after they was like, "Oh, okay." And if anyone knows Juvenile, he curses a lot. Like it's not morning TV appropriate. But so we got there. It was great. Shot the story, came back, wrote the story. His Tiny Desk had 1 million views in 24 hours.
Wow.
That hasn't happened since Usher. And so I was like, "Ooh, this is going to be huge for our story." So, and I was right. Our story aired, and our story went viral, like with Juvenile, and it was a win. I think that was something I was very proud of, because I was like, well, I feel like if I would have picked someone else, it probably wouldn't have worked. And I went with my gut of picking Juvenile, and that story went viral. Again, that's a story that we made for TV, but it also was made for social media. That's one knows how you use social mediums. Like I was producing for TV, but also for social media to get likes and shares and all of that. So it was one of those things like people saw like the story, and I loved it. That's a more lighter story. Again, it's not all about doom and gloom. Like there are fun stories that I cover. I should cover a lot of fun stories at my job. So a lot of sports too. So.
Okay, so last question. This day that we're having at school is about belonging in general. So how can we use, or how can you give us some advice about representation in media and how that can relate to belonging as a whole?
I think just being your whole self at work and in the media, and bringing that to a newsroom. I am myself outside of work and at work. I think, of course, you grow into that. I don't think if I was 22 years old, right out of college, that I was like that. But now I'm just thinking like, oh, I make sure I bring my ideas, and my ideas are my ideas around my community and my different types of communities. That's how I always make sure that I belong and someone should be belonging.
All right, that's amazing. Thank you so much for taking time to speak with me, and we really appreciate everything that you've given us today. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Thank you. This is great.
We want to thank Mr. Irving for taking the time to join us today. And thank you to Sophie for conducting that wonderful interview. We hope you enjoyed it. Enjoy the rest of your day.